Functions of literature. See this more like the benefits of literature, right? Not just functions, but benefits of literature. What's the first thing that literature gives you? One, entertainment. Before you buy a book, you're not probably thinking, okay, how do I use this book to pass my exams? Or how is this book going to help me? You're buying the book because you want to be entertained, because you want to read it and enjoy yourself, right? So the first thing that literature gives you is entertainment. You don't watch a movie because you just want to, watch it for, even if it's going to be an educational movie, right? You're not watching it first because it's an educational, you're watching it because you want to get pleasure from it. You want to be entertained. So that's the first function of literature, to be entertained. Number two, literature is educative. So yeah, of course, it's educative. That's actually why I'm doing this video. So if after you are done, or if you're not reading a book to be entertained, you're probably reading a book to be educated. And how does literature educate you? Literature is borrows. What do I mean by that? Literature takes from different parts of the world. So you don't actually have to be in America to have experienced America. That's the beautiful thing about it. So it is very, very educative. You don't have to, actually be or visit someone's state to actually know what that state or experience what that state feels like. You just need to read it in a book or watch it in a movie or have someone tell you down. By the way, somebody telling you something is also a form of literature. Remember, oral literature. So yeah, that's number two. Number three function of literature. Literature is futuristics. It's futuristic, beg your pardon. When we say literature is futuristic, what are we saying? There are some books that have been written and these books were said to almost be prophecies. And how do I mean? Now, some people wrote books on technology in the days when technology did not exist, right? They had an imagination that was so vast that they could predict that at a point in this time, probably in the 21st century, technology would exist. Now, you'd have probably thought they were, some fetish things. But no, that's what literature is about, because literature basically uses our imagination. So if you can imagine it, it's possible that it can happen. So it is very, very futuristic. The things you must have read 10 years ago and didn't think would happen, you probably are seeing them today. So literature is very futuristic. Another function of literature is that it preserves our past. How do I mean? I mentioned earlier that you probably have heard about the Civil War or the Biafra War or the World War I or World War II. Now, you were not there, were you? I wasn't. But the reason you know about it is because you probably read about it. Wherever you read about it, it doesn't matter. But the fact is that literature preserved it. So even if you read it on the internet, even if somebody told you, that's a form of literature. So you probably read about the Biafra War in a book. Now you know about what happened in the Biafra War because you read about it. So literature preserves your past. Now, some of our states have very, very, very funny histories. But imagine there was no record of it. Imagine there was nobody to pass it down to you orally or in written form. You'd probably be, what's the word now? Anyways, that's the point. It preserves our past, right? And if our past is preserved, then it's easier to move on to the future. One more before we go. Literature is a mirror of the society. This is a very important function because it's almost like the definition of literature. Now, literature mirrors the society. How do we mean? Now, the things that happen in the society, people do not just write out of the blues. They do not just write because they want to. They do not just write because, they are good writers, right? They write because they want to talk about the things that are happening to them or around them. So you see people write about politics. You see people write about, social, being socially acceptable. You see people writing about their religious views. You see people writing about whatever it is that is personal to them or around them. So literature mirrors our society. There's something I'd like to clear. Literature in English or English literature. Now, there are a lot of students and teachers, not to be rude to anyone, but most of us don't know the difference between literature in English and English literature. They sound alike, but that doesn't make them the same thing. Now, when we talk about literature in English, what do we mean? Literature in English is any work of creative imagination that is written in another language around the world, but translated to English. While English literature is a literature or a body of works that is written by someone who is English and written in English. So take, for example, William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare is from England, right? And he writes in English. So that qualifies whatever he writes as what? English literature. But someone else, probably from Africa, let's use France, for example, could write a book in French, and then somebody else, it doesn't necessarily have to be him, could translate this work into English. Now, that qualifies to be what? Literature in English. Let's take it again. English literature is any body of work that is written by an English person in English. And while literature in English is a body of work written in any other language around the world, but translated to English. So know the difference. They do not mean the same thing. So that will be the end of today's class. But before we go, let's quickly run through some of the things we already mentioned. So we talked about the definitions of literature, and I gave you two definitions that's to a considerable extent encompasses what literature is all about, right? So the first definition I gave you was that literature is anything that is written. So your flyers, your books, your mathematics textbook, your Bible, whatever, anything that's written is literature. And then the second definition I give you is that literature is any work of creative imagination. So if you can imagine it, right, and, put it into or bring it into reality, that is what literature. Then another definition that you probably might want to hold on to because it's very, very popular is literature is a mirror of life. It mirrors the society, it mirrors a person, right, and expresses himself. Now, we also talked about the functions of literature, and we're going to run through it. Literature functions: 1, entertainment; education; preservation of the past; futuristic; and, it's a mirror of the society. All right, we also went through literature in English and English literature. What's the difference? Literature in English is a body of works written in any other language and then translated to English, while English literature is a body of works written in English by an English person. So thank you. In our next class, we're going to be talking about figures of speech. Figures of speech.